where it's kind of hot right. It's hosted by the Climate, Peace and Transboundary Resilience Pavilion. A long name, but that's all right. But it's supported by ODI, and it's ODI, now ODI rebranded last week, I think. So it's ODI World or ODI something else. They are no longer ODI, right? So today for this discussion, we're really, you notice there are no panelists here. They're all there, so you will see them in a little while. So it's too small for me and the panelists here. So we'll bring them. It's a little bit different we're trying today to make sure that we have an event that people can participate in and people can just be engaged in. And we're really trying to build some momentum around heat. And if you're from Jamaica, we never pronounce an H. So anybody that is from Jamaica, we just say eat. So if you hear me say that, forgive me, the H is gone, right? We have a brilliant lineup of speakers for you, and I'm going to apologize one time. To all the speakers, you can call me Uname, and I'll call you by your first name, right? And we hope that we will get inspiration, not from your name, but from what you say, right? And so I'm asking your permission to just use your first name. And if I don't have the permission, I'll step outside after, and you can abuse me after. I'll take the abuse, right? So your name, the institution I'll identify, and really just the passion that we want to build this momentum all around. I'll look to see if I see a speaker that I want to hear from, so they will come in no order. And if you know anything about Jamaica, we are an orderless, very, very ordered society. So I will call the speaker in no particular order, and you stand up. I'm asking people who are standing, however, not to take the seat of the speaker because I will get them off the stage after the allotted time. And therefore, just to keep the conversation going, there's a QR code there. And if you feel inspired, the cup is all about QR code. You're even ordering your food through the QR code. So we are inspired to scan the QR code. And with those few, I'll introduce to you our SG, the Secretary General of the International Federation of Red Cross, dear to man Red Crescent Societies. Jagan, you have the floor. Let me see if we can get it on. Yeah, yeah. It's a turning table.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Inami. I wanted to make it very informal, but I still need my cheat sheet. So thank you for that beautiful introduction, and thank you, everyone being. I think short discussion is around the and we have been in IFRC, with our climate center, we have been talking about heat for quite some time. But every time July, August comes, there is a heat, people are affected, it becomes a bit of a topic. And comes October, the sun disappears, and also the topic disappears. And we have now worked with USAID and others, and I'm very happy to have DG Klima here. I think this year we started some work together on climate adaptation, because what we found with this study is that it is really a silent killer. Almost 500 killed every year. 500,000 people. That's not a small number. Even in last couple of years, when we have seen the conflict sort of going massively up, that number is nowhere, the people killed by conflict is nowhere close to this number. Again, I'm not trying to minimize the inhumanness of the killing by the conflict. I'm not trying to minimize that at all. But when you just purely compare the number, it's not even half of that. And it's also impacting the people who are really living in a vulnerable setting. The elderly is living alone. The children living in areas, which are not so accessible. How do we get the spotlight on this silent killer and not allow that we forget 10 months a year and then 2 months test and all those things. I will not get into those statistics. Must be a major. Okay. See, we have put this map for quite some 30 to contribute 100 million people across cities, 1,000 communities. So we try to keep the number so it's easy to remember. I should not remember. I need the cheat sheet. People across 100. And the approach where the people I would do at the heart of it is, of course, the planet, but also it's as big a challenge for people as it is for the planet. For the planet. So how to reduce exposure and equip people from the heat. The second is the places. How do we actually and sure, particularly in the urban setting, that's where we have seen the major challenge where the heat absorption is high. How do we equip the places, the cities, the houses, the accommodations? Then partnerships, and that's, I think, so important here today. We have such a diverse participation because none of us need to be a hero to try to do it alone, because none of us can do it alone anyway. One single hero. What we need is many, many heroes coming together. And that's really the approach from the IFRC. We want to work together. Of course, we are a very community-based organization with the local Red Cross and Red Crescent to 16 million volunteers who lead. But these volunteers, organizations, can contribute because they live in the communities and they have the trust and access to the communities. So, people, let's focus on people. Let's ensure that the places people live are safe enough, and let's do this together, partnership. To bring a sense of urgency on the issue, because it is killing people and it is killing the people in vulnerable setting. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from everybody, of course the speaker, but everybody here, get that momentum. So when we go forward,
let me thank the SG, but also let me remind him that some of us are from, the heat does not disappear. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. And I was telling the gentleman at the mic, what I can't tell you, but what we do when the heat is on. The beach is there. You can use your mind, right? Right. So it's really just getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and really not, people just can't go outside anymore, and the homes are not built. So the partnership really that you spoke about is really needed to protect the lives of the people. That's it. So thank you, SG, for setting that context. And so let me hear from the partners now that we are talking about one by one, and really, and the organizations that are here to frame the conversation as you did, looking at just the people, the places that that are suffering, but more so the partnership that we need to build out and to build this momentum to make sure that we are protecting properties and lives and people. So I'm going to ask my panelists, sitting panelists, that you have 5 minutes in the first instance, and I'm used to putting people off the stage. Maybe that's why they bring me here. 5 minutes, because we have a lot of people to talk to us this evening. And I'm going to apologize again if I didn't get to you this evening. We'll get to you in the next session. All right? So let me ask, since we have, I think, UNDRR, the representative from UNDRR, Kamal, I'm going to, I know the work you're doing, and I just want you to tell us what you're doing and how you're going to do it and what the organization is doing.
So I am here to talk about what we are doing, but what we should be doing.
Okay.
There are three parts to the heat problem. The first part is really coming up with a good system of setting up heat-related thresholds, heat, humidity, wind, the work that Daniel does, which is, it is different from what you do for cyclones, because the cyclone is experienced uniformly across the world. You have sufficient scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't have that for heat. So many other things, the kind of culture you live in, the kind of houses you live in, the age groups, the sectors. So we really need to do work at the intersection of meteorology, public health, infrastructure, other economic sectors, and so on. That's one. The second part is social protection systems. We have great heat action plans that have come up in the last 15, 20 years. Some of them have actually shown to reduce the loss of lives. There are protocols that if a heat signal is like this, you close down the construction sites, you reduce the school timings, you alert the health workers, you train them in detecting the signals of heat stress and so on. So all of that is fine. It's saving lives, but it is still destroying lives. We do not have social protection systems to actually cover those whose jobs are lost because of heat. But these two are relatively easy bet. In the long term, as the Madam Moderator said, that we haven't built our houses to withstand heat, both in the global south and in the global north. Ultimately, there is no other way but to transform your built environment. And that's where we have done nothing. No one has done anything. The building regulations are 40 years old. They don't recognize that we live in a hotter world. We are destroying reservoirs and green spaces in urban areas. We should be actually enhancing them. We have no market for construction technologies that will make settlements, particularly poor settlements, resilient to heat, cool roof. If you just paint the roof white, 3 degrees centigrades, but there is no market for it. There is no functioning market for it. Why it is not there? That's a question we have to ask. The understanding, I would like, my dream is that Daniel and some urban planner and architect sit together every 3 months and understand what's happening and plan together. The dialogue between urban planners and climatologists and meteorologists is non-existent. I mean, the book, the Newfort's building standards, you're an architect, right? Building for climate is 50. They're used in architecture colleges. Architecture colleges do not teach passive cooling systems in buildings. And finally, we are not really using the technology, the emerging technologies. You can actually detect distress signals of what is happening in settlements in real time and alleviate that suffering very quickly. You can actually do many things these days. So these are some of the things, random ramblings. Hope to get started.
That's all right. We'll take the random ramblings. Thank you, Kamal. And what I'm hearing from you is that we want to flip the action plan on its head that was developed in a singular way and to have the joint of planning with the urban planners and all the people at the table making these action plans that can be in everybody.
20,000 kilometers of train tracks across the world is exposed to heat and is causing accidents.
He has the numbers. Don't take the train. Don't take the train. 120,000 kilometers of train tracks across the world is exposed. I'm going to remember you telling me that. But really, just to turn these action plans that we have, heat action plans, I didn't know we have those. And I've been in climate all my life. Yeah? So to turn these heat action plans into actionable documents and take them off the shelves and get this joined up planning. Thank you, Kamal. What a good way, really, really good way to start. Let me call Lindsay from USAID. Yes, I'm catching you off guard. Yaha, I did that.
Hold it there, apparently, and not hold the bottom third. It might be a bit better.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Uname, Secretary General, ODI, IFRC, for your leadership on this critical issue. My name is Lindsay Doyle. I'm the Director for PREPARE, which is the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience. This is the U.S. government's flagship effort on international climate adaptation. And Secretary General, you said that we're not here to talk about the problem set, but I think it does bear repeating that 2023 marked the hottest year on record, coinciding with deadly heat waves on nearly every single continent, from Pakistan to Tunisia to even at home in Texas. And we know that, according to the U.S., NOAA, and NASA, July 2024 marked the hottest month on record since the 1800s. Given this reality, this summer, the Biden-Harris administration hosted the first ever White House summit on extreme heat, really with a focus on prevention, knowing that we can make a difference in this number and reduce that. And so that was an effort that we pulled together domestically with our local governments. Internationally, at COP26, President Biden announced PREPARE, which is this whole of government effort to support more than 500 million people to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And through PREPARE, we have scaled up our support on climate information and early warning systems, including on extreme heat. In 2024, USAID's partner, the Famine Early Warning Systems Network, or FuseNet, launched new heat exposure projections that will really help countries with that planning effort in both the near and the long term. This year, NOAA trained over 80 forecasters and public health officials in the Caribbean and Pacific Islands in heat health early warning. And this is critical to get that information out to communities so that they know how to respond. Next year, NOAA plans to initiate early warning systems capacity building on heat with the focus in Africa, training of at least 50 forecasters in 6 pilot countries. We also we're really proud to work with the IFRC over in the spring to host with USAID Administrator Samantha Power the Global Summit on Extreme Heat, which brought together change makers from across the world to discuss many of these solution sets and strategies. And at the summit, USAID launched our Global Sprint for Action, which was an effort to really raise awareness about this issue and spur commitments. As just a couple of examples of the work that USAID is doing in response to that call, Asia Resilient Cities, USAID's work on urban resilience in Asia, is addressing extreme heat in Rajkot, India, by developing unused land into green spaces, assessing healthcare facilities for resilience and strengthening their response to heat waves, as well as conducting those community workshops that are critical for building that local capacity. We've brought in private sector partners to work on this effort, including U.S. companies such as Arup, which is a major engineering and infrastructure company that is providing much of that, the heat wave mapping for the city. In Jordan, we're working with schools to build out smart architectural solutions for to really ensure that students are in learning environments that are not overheating. And so to really mitigate those temperatures, schools are using interventions like passive heating and cooling systems, thermal building insulation, double glazed windows, and shared outdoor spaces. And by 2026, we're hoping that this work will support 30 public schools and more than 35,000 students. And we'd like to see this work accelerate and do this more. In the agriculture space, we know that extreme heat and drought is a leading driver of farmer suicide, unfortunately. And so we are working with our USAID missions in the Philippines, as well as Rwanda, Ghana, Zambia, and Senegal to build out those climate-smart agricultural approaches that can help with adapting to extreme heat. And lastly, because building standards were brought up, I wanted to highlight that we are working with an industry association to really make sure that businesses overseas and local governments have those codes that they need and the capacity to support that over time. Thank you so much and appreciate the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you so much. And I think what I'll take away from you, which is we keep saying that we're doing this for the next generation. And the work that we're doing in schools to make sure that the learning environment, children are not learning anymore. They are too hot. And a lot of the schools these days, especially in the global south, in the island states that were built not for learning, not for heat, no windows, they're not for learning. And therefore, tie that with the health centers that are not built. So thank you for the work that USAID is doing. And therefore, would want to see this spread wider across. And to throw that index out really is important for people to know that there needs to be not only IFCR problem, but a whole of society problem, and therefore need this partnership that we spoke about to make sure that people know that this work is ongoing, but also that these things, especially the outdoor workers, not only agriculture, but the construction workers, are really, really, really at risk. Thank you for that. So we heard two fairly lengthy. I'm going to go to my little impact speakers now. Maybe. And I'll call on, let me see, Paula from the World Bank. You're there? Okay. Owen. Hi. Hey, Paula.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if you hold it here loosely, it will work.
Does it work?
Yes.
Okay, I can tell. Okay, well, thank you very much, IFRC. Thank you very much, Secretary General Nimai. Thank you, John. Thank you to the team. So I'm just coming here from an event on the Fund for Loss and Damage, where the UN Secretary General reminded us that we just survived the hottest day on record, the hottest month, and the hottest year in history. And this is time really to acknowledge. Kamal reminded us that there is this gap in the education system, forming architects, but also, I would say, our counterparts in government. Everything we do at the World Bank, where I work as an advisor in the climate change group, everything we do is country-driven. We work with ministers, we work with technicians, and we encounter a gap in the education system and the way to look at economic planning, policy planning, education systems, health systems. Nothing ever encompasses the consequences of climate change. So what we do, we have specific reports that we call CCDRs, country climate and development reports that help inform the priorities for countries and how to really look at development as intrinsically linked to climate, so that every policy, every infrastructure actually is informed by climate in a way that prevents further damage and also builds better. In fact, we at the World Bank, we really support early warning system. The early warning systems for all. We have 119 projects. We have financed over 1 billion in these projects. But we also have support the global cooling facility that really tackles extreme heat consequences. Overall, the way we approach it, though, is really by increasing financing for adaptation in general, because the consequences, the heat crisis, is really about an adaptation crisis. And that's where we need to finance not only early warning systems, cooling facilities, but also social protection systems for people who lose their jobs. We need to finance better schooling. You will remember earlier this year, in South Sudan, over 2 million children were unable to go to school because temperatures reached 45 degrees Celsius, which is not humanly possible. Chad, the Sahel, reach those temperatures now on a daily basis. So our mission is really to help those children. There are 600 million globally now, 2 million only in South Sudan, but 600 million globally last year, whose education was affected by heat, by extreme heat. That's a lot. 500,000 people died last year because of extreme heat, and in the next 10 years, that number is expected to quadruple, that 2 billion people globally. So in terms of resources, adaptation has to be now our main goal. We have set a goal of 45% of our financing to countries going to climate. That's $43 billion. And of these, half has to be for adaptation. We're not there yet, so we need to really do better and reach a 50-50 share between adaptation and mitigation, and within adaptation, support cooling systems, early warning systems, social protection systems. Some examples of our work that we want to replicate: 92 million investments in Sri Lanka, benefited 11 million people with advanced early warning systems. You will remember Cyclone Freddy in 2023 Mozambique, where with improved system, the death toll was much lower than previous cyclones. And we see that also in Bangladesh, that has established really effective early warning systems. We also work with cities. Ahmedabad in India, that is doing sort of South-South collaboration with South Africa and being kicked out. And I'm happy to answer any questions and give you more examples. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. I never kick anybody. My feet are too small. but we have so many speakers here. But thanks again. The numbers are important, and the targeting of what we need that adaptation finance is even more important, because as a policymaker, once a policymaker, I know when you say adaptation finance, it just falls everywhere. And so this targeting to solve some of these problems that we're talking about, and really the heat that really is. In Jamaica in this summer, for the first time, we went to 39. Unheard of. Unheard of. It was the first time. So really, as you say, targeting the cooling, the schools and so becomes very important, and to drill down a little bit more into the communities that are suffering. Really, that's what we're here talking about. And how do we do that? That's when we impact the lives of the people that's there. These are the people in the communities that need us. So I'm going to go to Imani from, got that right? Perfect. From ICLE? Yeah? Perfect.
Thank you. Is it on? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot for giving this opportunity. Thank you, Secretary General. I hope you remember that we have actually last year in COP28, we have signed an MOU with IFRC. ICLE and IFRC. I don't know how many you know about ICLE. ICLE is a city association all over the world. We have more than 2,600 cities as our members. As Secretary General is talking about IFRC and their numbers. So we have committed together that we will work together with our cities, because I think both Kamal and Secretary General and World Bank, everybody is saying that we need to work with the city governments. We need to work with citizens also, the community. So that's the MOU we signed. I'm happy to even tell you today that our colleagues in Bangladesh, I don't know how many of you know a city called Narayanganj. There was a training program happened on the heat action plan with some of IFRC colleagues are also joined today. So we both, as a partners, we have agreed that we will work with our partnerships, our both cities as well as with IFRC colleagues to educate, to train, to and scale up the action plans, what we are doing for the last 30 years, maybe with ICLE and also with IFRC on that thing. So we have actually even come out with last year a guidebook called Heatwave Guide for Cities. This is one thing which I will say it was like used by most of the city governments all over the world, not just, I represent mostly in South Asia and Asia Pacific region, but a lot of cities in Africa, Latin America have used this guide. I'm happy to share it with you, actually this one. This is one thing I think as to address like what Kamal was saying, that to train the city governments to use this guide and to plan for the heat action plans on that. At ICLE, we obviously work with through one of our pathways. It's called Equitable Development Pathway. We seek to foster just, inclusive, and happy communities through this pathway, and to aim and address the historical causes of injustice and exclusion, of identifying and action on power imbalances and new and unintended patterns of inequality and exclusion on this. So our intention is to empower citizenship. I think that is one thing what we talk about, peoples. And we also talk about mostly on the urban designing patterns. I myself has worked with various local governments in India to help them out. How can their buildings, I think one thing what Kamal was also talking about, how can they change their buildings? How can they design like a new designs to come out with the buildings to help them out on the passive infrastructure or whatever, to make sure they are livable. The houses, the homes should be livable rather than just making it a fancy homes or something like that. So we are doing this through ICLEI, and we are happy that we have partnered with IFRC on this. And hopefully, we were having discussions even in Brazil in our World Congress recently in the month of June. Maybe as a target, we want to start with 100 cities first to make sure that, I know it's a very small number compared to the number of cities all over the world, to say that this is how the citizens, the places, and the cities can come together and address this major issue. I know that it is not widely spread, but people are dying. I come from a city, this year, Delhi, we have more than, almost we touched 50 degrees centigrade the temperature. I could not even live in my own home. You can imagine, like I have air conditioners, everything, but this is the thing on that. So it is, we are committing to our partnership, Secretary General. Let us take it forward and see how we can help together to address this major issue on that. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
I don't need that. Let me remind you that we are at a climate conference. We're at a COP, and the number 100 is problematic already. But notwithstanding that, having clear target is important, and therefore, let's see, we want to really transform what we call cities. I call them the concrete jungles, because most of them are concrete jungles. And most of the city governments, as we know, have no budget because they report up to central government. So how do we get this partnership to ensure that we can devolve some of the financing that is coming from the World Bank and the USAID into city government? So thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to Jan. Yes, from the European Union, the DG Climate. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Unami, and good evening to everyone. It's my pleasure to share my thoughts with you tonight and to share how we are seeing the problem of the extreme heat. That is one of the most powerful pronunciations of climate change as we are experiencing. And to add one more figure of an example, between July 2023 and July 2024, there were 10 places on Earth where the daily temperature exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. And they were from the US to Morocco to India. So it is really important for the entire world. And we are focusing in this event on three perspectives: the people, the places, and the partnerships. And let me briefly address each of those. So people, let's look at the vulnerable communities that need most of our support. And we can see that climate change, and particularly extreme heat, are amplifying the humanitarian needs, and we need to see how we can respond to that. In the European Commission, we are taking a risk-informed approach. We are working to adapt the humanitarian aid both to the needs and scaling up the anticipatory action, but also increasing our disaster preparedness. And just this year alone, 79 million euros we spent on the humanitarian budget has been allocated to help communities prepare for climate-induced events. And we are also at the third dimension of this, which is greening the humanitarian operations and how we can apply some minimum environmental requirements. We are trying to support especially the fragile and conflict-affected countries. And all this is aligned with the Declaration on Climate Relief, Recovery and Peace, which was adopted at COP28. Moving on to places, looking at regions and areas which are most vulnerable to extreme heat. The impact requires focus, and we are trying to focus indeed on these vulnerable places that are most severely affected. One of them, typically, the small island developing states. At COP28, the EU has announced a €4 million contribution to the IFRC's global climate resilience platform that is specifically targeting SIDS. And we are working closely with IFRC, and we have identified 4 countries for our initial focus, which is Belize, Guyana, Kiribati, and Vanuatu, and look at how we can enhance their climate adaptation. It's not just the European Commission, but we are working in a Team Europe spirit with the member states of the EU. I would mention here the Netherlands, Italy, Ireland, and Spain, where altogether we have gathered 33 million euro to the GSRP. Thirdly, on partnerships, this is very important. Reliance on collaboration, bringing the resources together. We have platforms like the EU Screen Alliance and partnerships. And one concrete example, which just builds on what we heard from Ikle, is the urban climate action. And we see also in Europe how cities are very vulnerable. The floods that have just struck Valencia and the region are a very sad, most recent example of this. We work with cities a lot. We have a long-running experience with the Global Covenant of Mayors that has 13,500 cities, and we want to develop local actions and plans. We want to design solutions like green infrastructure that can help address these risks in the cities, but also empower local communities and bring the climate action close to citizens. So, in closing, we are working on the 3 dimensions. We want to address both the symptoms and the root causes of climate change. We are integrating climate resilience into our humanitarian aid and partnerships and aim to help vulnerable communities. And we also want to make sure that our humanitarian aid is more sustainable and cost-effective. So we look forward to working with all the partners on this important topic, and thank you for inviting me to contribute to this session.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad I'm here in countries in the Caribbean. You notice I'm wearing a Belize badge, so that's good that's good hearing. But really, just to say that when we design the solutions, as I hear you're saying, it has to be done with the people who are impacted, and I think that's what I got from you. I'm going to ask Jess to quickly come, and you will be my last 5 minutes. Anybody else after Jess? I'm going to start to nudge you with my hips for 2 minutes. So you are my last 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? So I'm here wearing 2 hats. The first hat is as a funder into this space. I'm one of, I'm from Quadrature Climate. Quadrature Climate Foundation is one of 60 funders that is scaling up their funding in the adaptation and resilience space. There's a new collaborative called the Adaptation and Resilience Collaborative, which after the UNSG's call on extreme heat over the summer, committed $50 million of Fast Start funding into this space. But the main hat I'm wearing actually is one of our partners who's delivering the work on the ground. So that's the Climate Resilience for All initiative, run by Kathy Bergman-McLeod, who can't be here today, but has asked me to say a few words about the work. So that is what I'll focus on. CRA's mission is to strengthen and support the health and livelihoods of women in vulnerable communities facing extreme heat around the world. And they focus on women for several reasons. The first one is that women are more vulnerable to extreme heat. And that's actually a physiological reason as well as a socio-cultural one as well. So physiologically, because of hormones, body temperature regulation, pregnancy, extreme heat does more harm to female bodies than it does to male bodies. A 1 degree rise in maternal heat exposure is linked to a 27 to 42% increase in the risk of miscarriage or stillbirth. So women, everybody is suffering, women are suffering more. There are also socioeconomic and cultural reasons why women are more vulnerable. Women working in outdoor jobs may be required to cover up. They may be excluded from cooling spaces. They are more likely to be water carriers, so they are having to go further in more extreme conditions. And it's not just a problem for women in developing economies. Women in Europe, particularly Southern Europe, are dying at twice the rate of men from extreme heat waves. But the second reason is that we know women are also part of the solution. Women show greater financial discipline than men. They outperform on leadership. And when you support women, that support carries through to people's families and their communities. So that is why CRA are collaborating with partners in local communities, in government, in the insurance industry, philanthropy such as ourselves, UN agencies, Secretary General, IFRC, and many, many others to create and deliver local and global solutions that build opportunities and choice for women in circumstances of extreme heat. A few examples of the work that they're doing that we are really proud to have supported. The first one is the Women's Climate Shock Insurance and Livelihoods Initiative, which is a parametric insurance mechanism that is essentially heat triggered. So women buy into this insurance. It is subsidized. It's been also supported by us, but also some of the insurance companies such as Swiss Re. And when temperatures hit a certain goal, the insurance mechanism pays out, which means that on the days where it is above, depending on what the temperature is, say 46 degrees, women don't have to go to work in those conditions, so they don't suffer in the same way. They don't suffer the same health consequences or the same financial consequences. They are able to buy food and resources that mean that they are less likely to suffer under those conditions. And in the recent extreme heat wave in India, 50,000 women were given this support. CRA now plans to scale that to 500,000 women. And they're working through the local partner of the Self-Employed Women's Association in India. Second, CRA are working with partners both in government and many of the partners here in the room actually on local heat action planning and early warning systems. So they're starting to roll these out. They've got a really nice pilot going in Freetown where they've allocated a chief heat officer, and CRA's senior heat strategist for Africa has just been appointed and will be working on rolling these programs out. And finally, they're focusing on the communication of extreme heat as an issue, including the communication of extreme heat waves through heat wave naming, because that's been shown where it's been used to be quite effective. So I can see I'm getting nudged. I'll start to walk slowly this way. I think just finally to say thank you on behalf of CRA to our hosts in the room, the SG in particular, and yeah, very much looking forward to working with you all on this.
Thank you, Jess. True representative of true partnership, wearing two hats. Wearing two hats, but that's not a fault of ours. You're hearing one person, 5 minutes. So we have 15 minutes more for this panel, and I have 10 more speakers. So we'll do 2 minutes each. So I'm gonna be really very strict now. And let me ask Amy. Amy, are you there? From Marsh?
Hi.
2 minutes.
I'll aim for less. Hi, Amy Barnes from Marsh McLennan, here representing the Insurance Defence Fund. So we've talked through a lot of the risks that come from heat. I think everybody knows the health, the education, the transport, the logistics, the business outcomes. So what's insurance doing? Insurance has, I think, a really important role. We just heard the example of the Sewa cooperative in India, where women in the informal economy have access to insurance to protect their livelihoods. But we're also seeing insurance play out in the developed world. In the US, we've just launched a product called Milkshake to support farmers because dairy yields go down significantly during extreme heat, and so incomes fall. We're seeing protections for gig workers, so people in the informal economy on 0 hours contracts who can't work. And often we see, certainly in cities, we see more people getting takeout during extreme heat and the gig workers being expected to exposed to these extreme heats. So insurance is for those communities to make sure they're not forced to work. But we also see more accidents and incidents. We see more people being injured at work because they turn up underslept, because they don't have access to home cooling. And a construction company recently did a survey of employees and found that the majority of employees during extreme heat turned up to work dehydrated, so they were compromised before they even started working outside, which has led to an education campaign and an increase distribution of hydration stations. We're also seeing more demand for insurance for ecosystem services. With extreme heat, we see far more drought. There's a big emphasis on ecosystem services when it comes to agriculture. We know the importance of water. I don't know how many people know that in Taiwan, for the past 3 years, the government has paid rice farmers not to plant rice so there's enough water to make semiconductors. We're not thinking about the impact of absence of resources in those environments. I really don't want to get kicked. But what I would say about insurance buys us time. That's all it does. Insurance works well when you are far away from the risk. As we get closer and closer to the risk, insurance becomes a less effective tool. So I am grateful to every actor in this room that's working really hard to use that time well. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I'm being branded as a violent person. I'm really not. But it's also good to see that there is some amount of innovation coming out of the insurance industry as we grapple with this significant risk of climate change that we have and the really heat that we are having. So I'm gonna, let's see, start network. Cut you, yes, 2 minutes.
Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. Great. So I'm Christina Bennett, the CEO of Start Network. Start Network is a network of 140 local, national, and international NGOs working to deliver humanitarian assistance across 6 continents. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the effective heat waves on fragile and conflict-affected states as a humanitarian. In places like Afghanistan, when heat waves hit, populations move, and populations move to places that are already vulnerable and affected by multiple and cascading risks. So where you may have a situation that's manageable in a community in Afghanistan, that displacement from a heat wave makes it unmanageable. And then you're in a really difficult situation. So what do we do about it? Well, the first thing is that we should not be treating heat as a surprise. We can predict heat waves with high degrees of accuracy, so why don't we start doing that? We can develop the models, we can pre-position the funds, and we can work with communities to pre-position action plans so that when there's a knowledge of a heat wave that's coming up, we can actually protect people rather than respond to their needs after a heat wave has struck. So just maybe a quick story about how we've done that at Start Network in Pakistan. We've developed several heat models covering different parts of Pakistan. In May of 2024, those heat models triggered 6 times because of the heat. So we were able to pre-position and trigger £500,000 worth of funding, protecting 225,000 people from heat waves before they happened. So, you know, we can sort of beat the heat together. Why? Because we have the collective science, the knowledge, and the action to be able to do it. We just need to apply that as collective action, all of us working together. Thanks.
Thank you, Christina. And let's also remember that with the displacement, some people just can't move because of other issues like sea level rise. There is really no place to move. And therefore, that kind of displacement that is taking place is also, you also have to marry the knowledge, especially in some of the small island states, which this displacement is already taken. So not only heat, but there are other factors. And that the predictive models are becoming more precise. We can do something about it before it happens. Thank you very much. Let me call on Owen. I'm speeding up now. Owen?
All right, can everyone hear me all right? Perfect. I'll try to be very brief to avoid not being kicked, but gently moved off the stage. My name is Owen Guy. I'm the Deputy Director of the Climate Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. Thank you for having me here today. And we're an organization working internationally to protect people from the impacts of climate hazards with a special focus on heat and heat waves. And since we began this work 5 years ago, IFRC has been a really valued and consistent partner, both IFRC and its reference centers. We've worked together on several projects with IFRC, but one of the main ones I'd like to bring up today in the spirit of partnerships is the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance. And this is a 60-member coalition, multi-sectoral, with engineering firms, public health specialists, the Red Cross and IFRC engaged. And it's focused on the impacts of heat to the most vulnerable in particular. So the Atlantic Council launched the Alliance in 2020, and I'm proud to say that the IFRC has been there throughout, is now a member of the steering committee, which runs the Alliance. And I just want to go back to the Secretary General's starting remarks that none of us can do this alone. There is no one organization that can be the hero on this, and I think alliances like this, like the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, are one way of kind of pushing this work forward. So looking forward to continuing the partnership with IFRC and advancing this work together. Thank you.
You'll get a prize. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Since we've been talking about schools and houses and homes and buildings and infrastructure, let me see if I can find Bernhard. UN Habitat.
Yes, thank you very much, Bernard Barth from UN Habitat, partner with many of the speakers, so hopefully I can also be relatively short. Maybe just to very briefly mention, yes, we are of course very excited about the Secretary General's call to action, because that for us is one vehicle to accelerate partnerships, to deepen partnerships. But maybe just to very quickly start by saying where we have come from. Of course, UN Habitat's been working on climate action for many years. Our emphasis initially has been to look at the urban heat island effect. And we used to say, as a rule of thumb, at extreme days, it's 4 degrees hotter in cities than it is outside. Now we observe sometimes 12 degrees. So really, the impact on cities, on people in cities is huge. We are working on integrated climate action plans that integrate heat. Of course, urban design solutions are critical in terms of, for example, blue-green infrastructure, nature-based solutions, but of course also architectural interventions that were mentioned. And our particular emphasis is on urban poor communities and climate resilient informal settlements. And we've heard already before that heat affects those communities to quite some extent. Important also in terms of our partnerships, Global Covenant of Mayors was mentioned before. We work with them. One initiative that hasn't been mentioned is the Innovate for Cities partnership, which looks at innovations in the climate space, and heat is one of the areas that we address. We are now working with our country officers to really integrate climate change, urban heat into climate change work much more significantly. So in that space also very much looking forward to partnerships. But let me end by one particular point that maybe hasn't been mentioned so much here, and that is the national frameworks. We're working on national adaptation plans, on NDCs to integrate the urban dimension into those, and heat is one particular entry point there. We are working on the urban NDCs. Key focus here, we have an urban ministerial meeting. Urban heat will feature prominently in that one as well.
You said something that is so dear to my heart, the national frameworks and how this all comes in. And a lot of times, when the plans and the programs are outside the national framework, they never work. And as one who have worked in government and struggled with this all through ages, for financing, for plans, for programs, just looking at what we have and building on what we have and integrating all of this into the national framework becomes even more important now. And the build out of these partnerships that we talk about is to use what we have and build it out. And the history is important. We say if you don't know where you're coming from, then you cannot chart where you are going. And I think the history of where we are coming from is also important. So thank you, UN Habitat, and the work that you do, especially in countries, to help to solve these problems. I'm going to find Daniel.
Thank you very much. I'm Daniel Cull from the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. Apologies from our Secretary General who couldn't be here this evening, but she is busy ringing the alarm bell all over this compound. Also, I wanted to clarify from Kamal's statements, I am not responsible for weather forecasting all over the world. So I'm representing, but I do want to stress you raise an interesting point, and you did too, in context specificity about thresholds and forecasting. I live in Switzerland. When we get a heat warning, the temperatures we get that at would make you from Jamaica laugh, because you're used to that. It's normal. Perhaps your buildings are more adapted to that, but in Switzerland, our buildings are not ready for that, and we suffer even in lower temperatures. We are committed to developing early warning systems that also cover extreme heat. This will actually come out tomorrow at a high-level panel with Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, about early warnings and early warnings for all and heat. We, the WMO, together with the World Health Organization, the WHO, have launched the Global Heat Health Information Network. I know the Red Cross movement through the Climate Center is also part of it, which is really focusing on building public awareness and educating people to close the gap between the climate science, our community, and actionable risk reduction delivered by the public, by partners of the public, and of course also by authorities. I'm moving quickly to make sure I stay within my 2 minutes here. In terms of places, so that was people. In terms of places, a lot of this has already been mentioned, but it's clear that the technology and infrastructure we so heavily depend on, particularly in urban settings, is so thermally fragile and will fail under extreme temperatures. We heard about railroads before, also pavement and runways and streets, electrical cables, power grids. We are trying to work more and more as climatologists and meteorologists with the legal frameworks and the entities that manage these critical pieces of infrastructure, but also recognizing that protective policies on labor, on housing, on building codes, as was mentioned, they also don't consider temperature extremes yet. And so we're working with them to try to improve that, as Kamal pointed out. Finally, of course, nobody can do it alone. We certainly cannot as meteorologists. We have a very limited scope of what we do. It's very important, but we're here to help you all make decisions, to help the public make decisions, and to help everyone adapt. So we're fully on board with this initiative, and we look forward to scaling up our work together.
You see, people are following instructions, right? We have a very compliant audience. Thank you very much. And I really think that we see where the partnerships are, the commitment. I'm hearing really, really good commitment, and therefore, and therefore, you have to hold them to it. We have the notes here. You just have to hold them to it. So I'll remind you to hold them to it again. And I'm going to go quickly to Chinmaya? Yes. The Defense Council. Let's see. Civil defense or what?
I'm Chinmay Acharya. I work with NRDC India Private Limited, and we work on both heat and cooling issues. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to mention about our work. And as per the theme, if we look at people, places, and partnership, people is the community, the beneficiary community, the community at large. We also work with the government departments so that there is optimized coordination and solutions are provided in a timely manner. That will ensure preparedness and both preparedness and response. The third one, the second one on places, we are working with the national government on again developing heat mitigation and management frameworks. We work with state governments as well as city level. Partnerships are very important, particularly within the different government agencies that are there to provide services. So we work with urban local bodies, the urban development departments, urban local bodies, the health department, the meteorological department, and we try to convene them from time to time to provide any capacity support so that the heat action plans that are developed are robust and are context relevant. Thank you.
Wow. So now I can close. I'm going to see if I find a detail to close. Are you there? To close out the panel. Yes.
So I don't have a time limit, right? I can just go on and on.
I still have hips.
I have to hold it close to my...
You have to also follow the instructions of the mic.
Okay.
Yeah. one hand at the top. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Aditya. I'm the director of the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. We're a reference center of the IFRC, and we're deeply privileged and honored to support this incredibly ambitious, highly urgent initiative launched by the SG here. Heat is one of those rare issues that all our teams across my organization work on. Our conflict team is looking at the impact of heat on conflict-affected people. Our health team is trying to determine the health impacts of extreme heat. Our anticipatory action team is developing new and complex ways of forecasting heat waves and developing triggers. Our localization team is developing fine-grained action plans with Red Cross branches on how to deal with heat waves. And our urban program is developing heat action plans with municipalities across the global south. And we're hugely excited to contribute this expertise and work with all of you to make this brilliant initiative a huge success. This whole session has been an incredible tour de force, and only Una May could have moderated this session so brilliantly. The kinds of insights that were shared in such an effective manner so quickly, I think have been deeply inspirational, and I think provide a very strong bedrock for making this initiative a huge success. I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of the Red Cross Red Crescent movement, and I'm sure we will keep having these conversations to mark our progress towards achieving the objectives that the Secretary General set out so eloquently at the beginning of the session.
Thank you all very much for putting up with me this evening. Hi, Aditya. I have to get back to you.